Justice Research and Planning Unit, established in 1995, but it was formerly known then as the National Task Force on Crime Prevention. Now today I'll speak with Sir David Simmons, former Attorney General of Barbados and former Chief Justice of Barbados, but today he holds the role of Chair of the Law Reform Commission. Sir David, thank you very much for agreeing to this interview, as today we delve into the early years of the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit, its mandate and its establishment. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for inviting me, Joshua.
So let's get straight into it, Sir David. I want you to take us back to the mid-1990s and inform us of what circumstances or national concerns prompted the establishment of this unit, as it was known then as the National Task Force on Crime Prevention.
Well, I'll answer that question, but perhaps I better go back to my childhood, because my socialization was largely conditioned by my experience growing up as a child of the Simmons parents at Dodds. It was then the Government Industrial School, Dodds for boys, Somerville for girls. Between 1948 and 1960, when I went abroad to study law. But in those 12 years, I was very conscious of interacting with boys. In those days, they had over 100 boys at the boys' school, with boys who were sent up there as juvenile delinquents. So my interest in juvenile delinquency and criminology started then. Well, of course, for my master's at LSE in 1964, I studied criminology as one of the subjects with one of the leading professors in England at the time, Errol Hall Williams, at LSE. And I was able then to understand the theory of criminology. But in 1974, I committed the Labour Party in the manifesto of 1994, page 34, it said the BLP government will establish a national task force on crime. This will be a permanent body comprised of a number of persons from different agencies combining a variety of disciplines. And I then had the good fortune of going to a UN conference with my then permanent secretary, Branford Goddard, and the then Commissioner of Police, Mr. Grantley Watson. We went to Naples in Italy. And I met Professor Vincent Del Buono, B-U-O-N-O. He's dead. He died now. But he sought me out because he was also a senior member, a founding father, as I recall it, of the International Society for the Reform of the Criminal Law. And he knew our Chief Justice at the time, Sir Dennis Williams. They were very close friends. So he found me, and we were talking, and I said to him that I wanted to establish this task force on crime prevention. Well, I didn't say crime prevention at the time, I said crime. And he said, well, I'm in a position to help through UNDP, or the UN office in Vienna. But you have to call it crime prevention. And I said, okay, fine. And so we called it Task Force on Crime Prevention. He came to Barbados and sat with us and gave me some ideas about how we should go about setting it up. Cabinet paper was done in the usual way. We went to Cabinet, it was not a problem. Cabinet all supported it. And I got funding in the estimates in 1995, I'm pretty sure. It was 1995, and somewhere around June or July 1995, don't remember the exact month now, we were able to launch it. Now the idea was that we needed some kind of unit that would approach the question of crime and criminality in a scientific way, using evidence-based methodologies and scientific methodologies to investigate what were the factors that would predispose youngsters to the commission of crime, rather than guesswork. You see, there is no single, but up to that time and since then, for many years since, there has been no single explanation for the cause of crime. You can't say poverty. You can't say maternal deprivation or poor educational attainment. These are all factors which may come together and predispose, but it is very difficult to pinpoint one and say that is the cause of crime. Now, it is an unscientific way of assuming that because you think that bad parenting may lead to criminality, to advance that as a theory for criminality. You need to test it. And so I wanted to find an evidence-based system for informing not only public discussion, but more importantly, informing the strategies to be pursued by, for example, the police force, schools, education attainment, if there were situations where we had evidence that a large segment of the prison population, for example, had shown very poor educational attainment. Then, you've got to target that group, make sure in the schools you do your best to reduce the incidence of that particular type of factor that may predispose, not will, may predispose to crime. So we set it up, and I have here the terms of reference for the task force. Said to examine and analyze by the use of appropriate scientific or criminological methods the incidence of crime in Barbados and to identify the factors which predispose to criminality. That was the first one. And the second one was to examine and analyze and review the existing methods and or systems used for collecting and collating statistical data concerning the incidence of crime in Barbados, to determine the adequacy or otherwise thereof, and to make recommendations for improving the said methods and or systems. Because we only could rely on the statistics, the criminal statistics produced by the Royal Barbados Police Force, and improved over time and so on. But those criminal statistics tend to show that crime, like any other social phenomenon or economic phenomenon for that matter, can be measured. But it was never properly measured. We relied only on the criminal statistics, and criminal statistics, though helpful, have a dark figure of unreported crime that may distort the final picture. And of course, there's a difference between that and, for example, a crime survey. We come to that in due course, presumably, as one of the things that the task force did. Yeah. It was a small unit. I had to recruit somebody who was skilled in criminology. Because that's 30 years ago. You didn't have so many people as you have now studying criminal justice. And I wanted a Bajan who understood the society, and I was very fortunate. We found Miss Yolande Ford, who was a Barbadian who had done extremely well academically. She had been to my own University of London School of Economics also as an Arabara scholar. And she had had the benefit, whereas I studied with Errol Hall Williams, she studied with Robert Reiner. Both of them are well-known criminologists. Reiner was later than Hall Williams, of course. And I met her, I think it was in England on a trip, and I was very impressed. And she willingly came back and took it upon her back to get that off the ground.
Tell us about your initial reaction when you were asked to be the first director of what was the National Task Force on Crime Prevention.
Well, first I must say I didn't expect to be, to have the opportunity. And I would give a bit of a context. I was actually doing my doctorate at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York when this opportunity came up. So it was a major decision. You are either going to continue your PhD or you are going to go home and serve your country. And I chose the latter. Sometimes persons think that crime and its incidence is new. It is not. There were some troubling periods coming up to the 90s and even in the late 80s when, I would have studied the incidents of crime and criminal dynamics in Barbados. And there were some fairly gruesome incidents as well. So having studied first in the UK, where I actually met Sir David, and then a few years later, knowing of this opportunity and being recruited for the position, it was an honor, and an honor which I graciously accepted. Eventually I realized, yes, this pioneering role is a big one, but sometimes it is good to have an opportunity to be the one to lay the groundwork. And just like laying a foundation, it's not easy. There are going to be teething problems, but at the end of the day, no building really stands without a foundation. So I felt honored to have the opportunity.
I'm glad to hear that. Now, at that time, Barbados was facing shifting challenges in terms of crime and justice. So what was the atmosphere like when the National Task Force was being established? And perhaps you could tell us about what specifically the task force was established to address.
Okay, I will deal with that question in two parts. Okay, so let's focus on the first.
Yeah.
Which is what was the reaction? I think, I think a lot of Barbadians were curious. What's this task force on crime prevention? The institution was often confused with the task force of at that time, the Royal Barbados Police Force. But there was definitely curiosity and anticipation as to what was going to be the work of this institution. And the Attorney General's office, under the leadership of Sir David Simmons, then Attorney General, helped to clarify what the role of the institution would be. But the initial reaction from Barbadians was anticipation, curiosity, and of course, many persons would have asked, she's a policewoman? She's a police officer? And I would like to speak to that at some point in time, that there's so much about crime prevention that is not policing. And it was important, or really I was fortunate, that the then Attorney General understood that and wanted to establish a department that would focus more on the criminal behavior, the person himself, the offender. Understanding, and I would emphasize this as I go along, that crime is first and foremost a behavioral problem. I'll come back to that point, but what Sir David would have mentioned to me at that time is we must no longer plan, projects, programs, etc., or do programming by gut feeling or intuition. There must be some scientific base for our policies and programs, for our actions. There needs to be statistical data based on empirical research that drives our departmental efforts.
Yeah.
And when I say departmental efforts, I mean across all spheres of government, not just the Attorney General's office. So, as I said, it was fortuitous that the leader, the ministerial leader at that time, understood very clearly that policing was just one aspect of crime prevention. But we needed to have more focus on those factors that would predispose an individual to criminal involvement in the first place. And etiology of crime is one of my areas of specialization. So I would say I was well placed to develop the early program of the department at that time, with its focus on, as stated here in the terms of reference, to examine and analyze by the use of appropriate scientific or criminological methods the incidence of crime in Barbados, and to identify those factors that predispose to criminality. One of my favorite phrases in my entire career. And if you wish, I can go ahead and state why.
Please do.
Good.
Please do.
Sometimes we speak about crime and criminal incidents as a monolithic whole. Criminality is behavior, it's human behavior. I have never seen a gun shoot itself. A knife cannot carry out a stabbing without a human hand. A big rock, as we would say in Barbados, can't throw itself.
Nope.
There's an individual behind this.
Yeah.
Let's think it through. How much focus do we put on that? How much focus do we put on how did this individual get here? How did this individual get to be conducting him or herself in this manner? I put it to you, Mr. Hinkson, contrary to what a lot of persons think, most of the time, barring any type of, I would say, neurological, psychiatric, or psychological disorder, 90% of the time that's an evolutionary process. Does not happen overnight. By extension, it will not be solved overnight. That's why there is no quick fix to crime. Because once we're dealing with behavior, that's an evolutionary process.
Yeah.
How people, the whole process of socialization and all the influences that the person would have experiences, all their experiences throughout life, all of that shape, all of those things going to shape their perspectives and their thought processes, which drive behavior. The unit was set up as a research and planning unit. Yeah. And it has now adopted that name. That is an important part of crime management, crime prevention. So, as I stated, we were supposed to, adopt the appropriate methodologies to get information on what we would term in the field criminal risk factors. We determined that if we could identify those factors that predispose individuals to criminality, we would be able to develop policies and programs that could intervene in those circumstances and intervene in those lives at those critical times to divert that individual from that criminal pathway. So the focus then, or was the focus here was to complement what other departments in crime management in Barbados would have been doing. So you would have had at that time, your police force. You would have had other areas of law enforcement. You would have had your Office of Probation. You obviously would have had your criminal courts. So you had your entire your prison service. Yeah. You had your juvenile justice institutions. Yeah. So this department and the work of this department was to complement what they were doing. Yeah. Yeah. Once you're dealing with criminality, you need to have a broad base because it is a multifactorial problem. It's multifaceted.
The early 1990s, and I think 1993, was the year when the criminal statistics reflected the highest incidence of crime. I think we had 13,047 crimes committed. Oh. So it was against that kind of background that we had to create a response. Yeah. So I had no problems with cabinet, no problems with the Minister of Finance or Owen Arthur providing the funding for me to set up the thing. We started small with 3 or 4 people in the unit and gradually expanded and so on. So can I say that I'm proud of the work that has been done?
Definitely.
You know, again, you have to go back some years to the time when I and Yolande, we were putting together things. And one of the things we did was to have the unit, well, first of all, I better mention that I was able to recruit from the Home Office in England a man to come and give leadership to the unit, Christopher Nuttall. And he worked with the team down here. And one of the things we did for the very first time in the history of Barbados was to prepare a green paper on crime reduction. Not a white paper. You do the green paper, and the green paper invites the public to contribute to the issue. And then after that, you do the white paper.
The Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit has become a pillar of the criminal justice system in Barbados now for a number of years, and it has been ably led by its director, Cheryl Willoughby, who has been at the helm for over 20 years. The unit first began as the National Task Force on Crime Prevention, but many of you would not know that Ms. Willoughby actually was the one who suggested the name change in 2012. So here to speak with us about the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit, its work, its programs, its initiatives, and the inner workings of this unit is Director Willoughby. But I want you first to begin by setting the scene and telling us all about the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit, which many people may not do a lot of work. So tell us about the workings of this department, its establishment and mandate.
The Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit was established in 1995. In 2012, as you rightly said, the name changed from the National Task Force on Crime Prevention. The department primarily conduct research into the extent and nature of crime in Barbados. And based on our findings, we work with other criminal justice partners, community-based organizations to plan and develop crime prevention programs aimed at youth who may be offending, as well as other vulnerable populations. In 2012, the department would have signed a memorandum of understanding with the OAS, the Organization of American States, to establish a national crime observatory. Now, what a crime observatory does is that it collates information, data on crime, and based on that, we are able to produce regular reports on crime. We're able to do crime trends, look at crime trends, hotspots, projections. We're able to determine where crime will turn up at any given time, who are the ones that are offending, and we are able to educate and intervene where necessary in some of the risk factors that we see gleaned from our research. So this is what we've been doing for the past 30 years, and to date we have been very successful.
Now, an important period within that tenure was the change in name.
Right.
The change in name from National Task Force on Crime Prevention to Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit. But of course there was a name change, but the mandate and vision remained the same.
Yes.
But I want you to tell us a bit about what encouraged you. Why did you believe that change was necessary?
Well, as I alluded to, my staff, we go into communities, at-risk communities, to conduct research, to speak to at-risk populations, to find out exactly what are the root causes of crime. And we recognized that we were getting some pushback from community members because of the name. They thought that we were police officers in disguise, task force on crime prevention. And also we had vehicles with the MP on it. So I recognized that as a problem, and so I advocated at the highest level for the name to be changed, and it was. The policymakers, they determined that it was important to have the name changed, and as well, the vehicle number was changed to a private number to allow us to seamlessly go into high crime communities and garner the type of information that was necessary for us to be able to produce reports on crime.